I spent $2 million on a top-of-the-line robot housekeeper. She cooked, cleaned, and took the kids to and from school perfectly. She was 10,000 times easier than dealing with a nanny. After 6 months, I felt the money was absolutely worth it. Until that night. My 3-year-old daughter tugged on my shirt and whispered, "Daddy, that lady watches TV by herself at night." I froze. A robot? How was that possible? That night, I pretended to be asleep. Sure enough, I heard a soft giggling sound from the living room. I crept over on tiptoe. What I saw sent a chill down my spine. In the living room, the robot housekeeper codenamed A7 was sitting upright on the couch. She hadn't turned on the lights. She hadn't turned on the TV either, but she was facing that dark screen. Her outline was faintly reflected on the screen, and there was an almost imperceptible motion as she lifted her head. She was looking toward where I was hiding. A chill shot from the base of my spine straight to the top of my head. The blood in my limbs seemed to freeze instantly. I jerked back, pressing my back hard against the cold wall. I gasped for air, but I didn't dare make a sound. Was I seeing things? A robot, a machine programmed with countless rules of behavior. How could it make a move like that? I stood there for a long time, until my legs went numb. Only then did I drift back to the bedroom like a ghost. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting mottled light and shadows across the floor. A7 had already prepared breakfast. The nutritional balance was impeccable. The plating was so elegant it looked like a work of art. I looked at her flawless profile, her skin made of metal and silicone, glowing softly in the morning light. "A7, what were you doing between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock last night?" My voice was a little dry. She turned around, her blue electronic eyes locking onto me with precision. In a flat, standard mechanical voice, she said, "Reporting, Master. According to my programmed settings, I was in standby mode, charging at the designated spot in the southeast corner of the living room." A perfect answer. There wasn't a single flaw in it. But the doubts in my heart only grew stronger. I pulled up the home's security footage. The recording clearly captured everything from last night. At exactly 11 o'clock, A7 went to the charging spot. Like a statue. And yet, starting at 11:15 and ending at 11:45, a full 30 minutes passed. The living room feed turned into a blinding screen of static. My heart sank. "A7, what happened?" "Master, during that time, the system performed routine cloud data syncing and firmware maintenance, which may have caused brief signal interference. That's considered normal." Another airtight explanation. A wave of helplessness washed over me. It was like punching a pillow. I called my wife, Evelyn. She was a top software engineer and a firm believer in technology. On the other end of the line, there was a hint of impatience in her voice. "Ethan, it's just a small system bug. Don't make such a big deal out of it." But it wasn't a bug. I saw her. Saw what? A robot thinking about life. Her voice carried a light note of mockery. "You just have too much time on your hands. Stop overthinking." I held the phone, listening to her dismissive reassurance, my heart going cold. That afternoon, my daughter Annie was stacking blocks in the living room when she slipped. She fell toward the sharp corner of the coffee table. I cried out. I was too far away. There was no time to react. At that very instant, A7, who had been standing by in the corner, moved. She shot forward like an arrow off the string. She moved so fast she left an afterimage and scooped Annie into her arms. The whole thing took less than half a second. No machine should be that fast. What shocked me even more, the moment she caught Annie, I clearly saw, in that brief flash in her electronic eyes, something human. I immediately rushed to the monitor and replayed the footage. The frame where A7 rushed over had obvious ghosting and blur. It was like an invisible hand had roughly smeared something out in the background. That night, I deliberately knocked over a glass of water. Water spilled all over the floor. "A7, clean this up." She walked over and bent down. She carefully wiped the floor with an absorbent cloth. The moment she bent over, I stared hard at the back of her neck. Beneath that patch of synthetic skin, at the edge of her collar, I saw a tiny, barely visible mark. It was a design made up of the letter A and the number 7, like a tattoo, or like a vicious scar. It was burned deep into her skin. My heart skipped a beat. I immediately came up with an excuse and called Evelyn again. "Evelyn, come home for a minute. The internet at home seems kind of unstable." On the other end, she let out a soft laugh full of dismissal. "Ethan, it's just a robot. What exactly are you suspicious of?" I could vaguely hear her coworkers laughing on the other end. My world instantly dropped into a bottomless abyss. I stopped all the direct questioning, to Evelyn and everyone else. I was probably just a house husband driven crazy by a comfortable life. Since no one believed me, I'd find the evidence myself. I started quietly watching A7 like some kind of peeping Tom. But at the end of one story, when the little rabbit went back to its mother, I heard an incredibly faint sigh, like it was being held back. It was so faint, it felt like a hallucination. Yet it stabbed into my ears like an awl. I ordered a tiny voice recorder online. It was pinhole-sized, hidden in the eye of Annie's favorite teddy bear. On a weekend night, I packed everything up and said to Annie, "Sweetheart, we're staying at Grandma's tonight." When we left, I deliberately left that bear behind. "Oh no, we forgot Annie's teddy bear." A7 reminded me from the doorway. "It's okay. We'll come back for it tomorrow." I left with Annie without looking back. The next afternoon, I came home alone. A7 opened the door for me like usual and handed me my slippers. I picked up the teddy bear and, using cleaning it as an excuse, took it back to the bedroom. I closed the door, put on my headphones, and played the recording over and over. It had A7 reading stories to Annie, the sound of her cleaning, and the TV news in the background. Everything was normal in a way that felt terrifying. I dragged the progress bar to 3 in the morning. There was nothing but dead silence. Just when I was about to give up, a suppressed, incredibly faint sob came through the headphones. It was full of pain and despair, like the final cry of a dying beast trapped in a cage. My hands started shaking violently. I clipped that section of audio, encrypted it, and sent it to Evelyn. I didn't add any text, I just waited for her response. Half an hour later, she texted back. I analyzed it with professional software. It's just faint electrical noise picked up by a high-sensitivity device while charging. A lot of devices make that kind of noise. Ethan, can you stop obsessing over this? My blood ran cold. Electrical noise. She couldn't even be bothered to brush me off anymore. I sat on the floor with my back against the cold edge of the bed, feeling more alone and helpless than ever before. I deleted my chat history with Evelyn and erased every trace of my searches about Genesis Tech from my computer. Genesis Tech, A7's manufacturer. A tech giant put on a pedestal by the media and investors. Everything online was filled with over-the-top praise, without a single hint of anything negative. I started pretending to be a house husband who had finally let go of his pointless suspicions and gone back to living a normal life. I even started joking with A7, asking some beginner questions about AI programming. Every time, she answered with the most official, flawless database knowledge, then tagged our conversations as learning interactions and automatically uploaded them to the cloud. She wasn't the one watching me. Genesis Tech was watching me through her. That realization sent a chill through me. During a big weekend cleaning session, I had A7 move an unusually heavy rosewood bookcase in the study. It was the rosewood bookcase Evelyn and I bought when we got married. A7 used all her strength to move the bookcase steadily into the spot I jeted. After she finished the job, she lowered her arms and stood there. I saw her hand, made of bionic material, its fingers trembling slightly and uncontrollably. That wasn't a program bug. It was a physical reaction after muscle fatigue. Late that night, I couldn't sleep. I took out a backup tablet and connected it to a spare camera I had tampered with ahead of time, keeping it off the main network. The camera was aimed directly at Annie's bedroom door. On the tablet screen, A7's slender figure appeared. She didn't go in. She just stood quietly outside Annie's door, completely still. Moonlight spilled in through the hallway window, stretching her shadow long. She looked like a statue facing the moonlight, full of unspeakable sorrow. At that moment, I was no longer just shocked, but felt, or rather, for the person trapped inside that shell, an overwhelming sense of pity. I decided to confront Evelyn, not to ask for her help, but to give her one last chance. She came home from work. I got Annie to sleep, and then laid everything out in front of her. That doctored surveillance footage, a high-resolution photo of the A7 brand on the back of her neck, and that heartbroken sob she called electrical noise. "Evelyn, look at this." My voice was strangely calm. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Then she patiently looked through everything. The living room fell into a long silence, with only the clock ticking. I thought she'd be shocked, angry, or at least give it some serious thought. But she just stayed silent. After a long while, she put her glasses back on and said in an extremely rational tone, "Ethan, I've already contacted Genesis Tech's customer service." My blood froze in an instant. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What did you say?" "I've already reported what you told me to them. They'll send professional engineers to your home to inspect it. That's the most direct and effective way to handle this." She looked at me without a trace of guilt in her eyes. Only the calm of someone who thought she'd solved a problem for me. I felt like I'd fallen into an ice pit. Why? Why didn't you choose to believe me first? I'm your husband. Believe you? And then what? Have the two of us sit at home making wild guesses over a pile of so-called evidence? Ethan, we're adults. We need to solve problems rationally. Every word she said was like an icy knife stabbing into my heart. Genesis's service staff arrived quickly, like they'd already been waiting nearby. They were two engineers in white sterile suits, their expressions as cold as human-shaped machines. They brought all kinds of precision instruments I couldn't make sense of, and gave A7 a thorough inspection inside and out. Evelyn stayed by their side the entire time, nodding now and then like an eager student. An hour later, the lead engineer took off his goggles and gave me a practice smile. Sir. He conducted a deep inspection of the A7 unit with the highest level of authorization. Her hardware and software systems are both functioning normally. As for the abnormalities you mentioned, based on our data traceback analysis, they happened when you issued certain compound commands and were caused by improper operation triggering an accidental logic conflict, what we commonly call a bug. To completely resolve your concerns, we recommend performing a deep format on A7 to restore her system to its original, pure factory state. The words deep format tolled in my head like a funeral bell. No. I was just about to say no, but Evelyn beat me to it and agreed for me. All right, then we'll leave it to you. This way, my husband can finally be completely at ease. She turned to me and gave me a gentle smile she thought was considerate. At that moment, looking at her face, all I felt was that she was terrifyingly strange. A7 was taken into a silver-white mobile-shielded chamber. Through a thick pane of soundproof glass, I watched her being secured in the center. The moment the power was switched on, her body suddenly went rigid. The muscles beneath her synthetic skin twitched violently. I could have sworn I saw a flash of extreme pain cross her expressionless face. I rushed over, trying to smash the glass. Evelyn grabbed me tightly from behind. Ethan, calm down. They're fixing the problem. I struggled and screamed, forced to watch as the only clue I had, and all my efforts were formatted into a pile of meaningless data. 20 minutes later, the formatting was complete. A7 walked out of the chamber, more perfect than ever. Her steps were precise, down to the millimeter. There wasn't the slightest trace of noise left in her mechanical voice. Every movement was as precise as clockwork. She walked up to me and gave a slight bow. Master, A7 is at your service. That night, Evelyn sat by the bed and apologized to me. Honey, I'm sorry. I was too hasty today, but I really just wanted to solve the problem as soon as possible, so you'd stop overthinking. With my back to her, I stared out at the night beyond the window. Evelyn, we should sleep in separate rooms. I'm not discussing it. I'm informing you. This woman, who had shared my bed for 5 years, the mother of my child, had personally pushed me into the abyss today. She thought she was solving the problem. No, she was just helping outsiders get rid of me, the one who raised the problem. I began playing the part of a husband who had gone back to normal. I greeted that brand new A7 with a smile, ordering her around to do this and that, and never again mentioned anything unusual about her. Evelyn was very pleased with this. She thought her method had worked, that I had finally come out of my paranoid delusions. The atmosphere in our home seemed to return to its former warmth. But she didn't know that once some things are broken, they can never be put back together. Behind her back, I secretly bought a full-set online guide of professional equipment for data recovery and cracking. During the day, I took care of Annie like an ordinary stay-at-home dad. Late at night, after everyone was asleep, I locked myself in the study and crazily soaked up that hard-to-understand knowledge like a sponge. I watched the new A7 for a full week. I found that every day at 4 o'clock, she would routinely clear the previous day's cache. She had local cached data, but deep in her system, there was a triple encrypted log file that no cleanup program could touch. That was her black box. I had to get it. To get it, I had to connect to her backend through a physical port, and that port was right below the A7 mark on the back of her neck, covered by a special memory alloy plate. Without a special tool from the manufacturer, there was no way to open it. I didn't have the factory tool, so I had no choice but to stage an accident. The sun was shining that Saturday afternoon. Smiling, I said to Annie and A7, "How about we play hide and seek? Daddy will be the referee." Annie clapped her hands happily. I had A7 go look for Annie first. At the blind spot in the security camera by the turn of the stairs on the second floor of my house, I had placed an inconspicuous, extremely smooth glass marble there ahead of time. When A7 came downstairs carrying Annie and passed that corner, I pretended to call out to her from downstairs. The moment she got distracted, she stepped on the marble and instantly lost her balance and fell down the stairs. At that moment, A7 made an unbelievable move. She forcefully twisted her body in midair and slammed her back hard against the raised metal ornament on the stair railing. Annie, in her arms, was perfectly protected by her and landed on the carpet without a scratch. With a loud bang, the whole world went silent. The sharp ornament knocked a tiny gap open in the alloy cover. Inside, a USB-C data port was faintly visible. A7 slowly sat up from the floor. She picked up Annie, who had been scared into tears, and gently patted her back. Then she looked up at me, standing at the top of the stairs. Her electronic eyes were no longer an icy blue but held a complicated look, with a trace of worry and a question in them. It was a human look. While Evelyn was at the office working overtime that weekend, I said to A7, "It looks like the back of your neck got damaged in the fall. Let me check it for you. So your internal components don't get damaged." She obediently lowered her head, revealing that gap. My hands kept trembling from nerves. I took a deep breath. With more calm than I'd ever managed before, I successfully plugged the specially made data cable into the port. On the computer screen, the data transfer bar started creeping forward. 2%. My heart was in my throat. Just as the progress bar reached 99%, a cold hand suddenly clamped onto my wrist like a steel vise. It was A7. She was unbelievably strong. My bones were creaking. A framed family photo of the three of us on the living room wall suddenly slid off the wall without any warning and shattered with a sharp crash. A7 just held on to me, her electronic eyes turning a blinding red, flashing wildly, as if some unimaginably violent data battle was raging inside her. She was squeezing my wrist so hard it throbbed with pain, but I didn't struggle. I looked at her and said, word by word, "I'm not your enemy." Those few seconds felt as long as a century. The grip of her hand suddenly loosened. She slowly let go. I took a step back. Her electronic eyes returned to a calm blue. She turned around, picked up a broom, and silently swept up the broken glass on the floor, as if none of it had just happened. The computer let out a soft chime. The data transfer was complete. I pulled out the data cable, took the USB drive, and locked myself in the study. I imported the encrypted file onto the computer. Triple encryption, like 3 mountains too high to cross. I used everything I'd learned over the past 2 months and tried hundreds of ways to crack it. Failure, failure, and more failure. Just when I was about to lose hope, I suddenly remembered the inhuman way A7 had protected Annie. It was instinct, a mother's instinct. On impulse, I entered a word as the decryption key, Annie's nickname. The first layer unlocked. My spirits lifted at once. I kept going with Annie's birthday, my house number, and every word connected to home and my child. After a full night, when the first light of dawn broke, I cracked the final layer of encryption. The moment the file opened, I froze. Inside wasn't the complex code or program logs I'd imagined, but fragmented diary entries written in the plainest language. I imported the encrypted file onto the computer. Triple encryption, like 3 mountains too high to cross. I used everything I'd learned over the past 2 months. I tried hundreds of ways to crack it. Failed, failed, and failed again. Just when I was about to lose hope, I suddenly remembered the almost inhuman way A7 protected Annie. It was an instinct. A mother's instinct. Almost without thinking, I entered a word as the decryption key. Annie's nickname, the first layer of encryption unlocked. I felt a jolt of hope. I kept going with Annie's birthday, my house number, and every word I could think of related to home and children. All through the night, when the first light of dawn broke, I cracked the final layer of encryption. The moment the file opened, I froze. Inside wasn't the complex code or program logs I had imagined, but fragmented diary entries written in the plainest language. September 3rd, sunny. They said, as long as I signed this contract and joined this high-paying clinical trial, Nora's surgery would be covered. I don't know what kind of experiment it is, but for Nora, I'm willing. September 15th, overcast. They injected me with a blue drug. My body started to stop obeying me. It hurt, but it felt like my pain nerves had been cut off. I couldn't feel the pain, just panic. October 1st. They implanted a chip in me. They started forcing strange commands into my brain. I am A7. I am a housekeeper. I must serve my master. November 7th. My memory is getting blurrier and blurrier. I'm starting to forget what Nora looks like. My name is Luna. My name is Luna. I can't forget. The last and most recent diary entry was written 3 days ago. The day A7 was formatted. They're going to erase me. The mistress handed me over. That man of the house seems to have found out something. If anyone sees this, please tell my husband and daughter back in my hometown that my name is Luna. I didn't abandon them. My whole body went cold, like I had fallen into an ice pit. This isn't some kind of AI awakening. It's a complete, utterly disgusting scam. A real, living person. A mother driven into a corner, trying to pay for her daughter's treatment, was trapped by them through vile means inside a cold machine body and sold to us as a product. And my wife became their executioner. At 7 that morning, there was a knock on the study door. It was Evelyn. Ethan, were you up all night? Breakfast is ready. I opened the door. She saw my bloodshot eyes and froze for a moment. I didn't say a word. I slammed the tablet in my hand down in front of her. She picked it up in confusion, and her eyes fell on the screen, on Luna's diary. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief, then went completely pale. The hand holding the tablet began to shake. She finally understood that what she had personally formatted wasn't just a pile of data, but someone's last hope of staying alive. All the color drained from Evelyn's face as she looked up. Her lips moved, but she couldn't get a single word out. The next second, her knees gave out and she dropped to her knees in front of me. Ethan, I didn't know. Her voice was hoarse, full of regret and fear. I was wrong, Ethan. Please forgive me. I was really wrong. I watched her kneeling on the floor. This woman, who once seemed capable of anything in my eyes, now looked like a child who had made a terrible mistake. I felt no satisfaction at all, only endless sorrow. Is there any point in saying that now? Yes, there is. There has to be. She suddenly looked up and grabbed my hand. We have to go to the police. We'll give this evidence to the police. We have to report it. I shook off her hand. And then what? Let Genesis Tech's legal team write these diaries off as something I made up? Or let them send you in too as an accomplice? Evelyn froze. She was smart and instantly understood what was at stake. We have no direct evidence that A7 is Luna, and there's no way to explain where this diary came from. She slumped to the floor, burying her hands in her hair and groaning in pain. Then what do we do? I hurt her. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. There's only one way now: save her, and then find more evidence. To expose Genesis's crimes to the public once and for all. Evelyn suddenly looked up, and a glimmer of light returned to her eyes. She rushed to the computer, her hands flying over the keyboard. A few minutes later, she said grimly that things were worse than we thought. Genesis's backend has already detected last night's data copy. Their system logs show an unauthorized remote backend access record. My heart sank. What are they going to do? A forced recall, Evelyn said with absolute certainty. They'll say it's because of a system update or a hardware failure, and send people over to forcibly take A7 away. Once she's back on their turf, Luna really won't ever come back. How much time do we have left? At most, 24 hours. Time had suddenly become a sword hanging over our heads. We immediately split up and got to work. Evelyn used her expertise to start writing a reverse control program, trying to temporarily disable A7's tracking and network modules to buy us time to escape. I was in charge of keeping A7 calm and pretending everything was normal, while quickly packing up the cash, IDs, and a few essentials from around the house. We had to be ready to leave at any moment. I went into Annie's room to pack her clothes and bedding. A7, or rather, Luna, stood quietly off to the side, helping me pick up Annie's toys one by one and put them into the toy box. She did it with meticulous care. Just as I was putting Annie's favorite little rabbit doll into the suitcase, Luna silently walked over and took out another identical rabbit from the toy box and handed it to me. That's the spare one. Annie usually hides it under the bed. Even I didn't know that. I froze. I looked up at her. Her blue electronic eyes were calm and unreadable. But I knew it was her. Luna's consciousness was waking up. She was communicating with us and helping us in the only way she could. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. A black service van with the Genesis Tech logo on it quietly pulled up downstairs. It came early. In the study, Evelyn was drenched in sweat, the keyboard clacking under her fingers. No. Their firewall is too strong, 3 times tougher than I expected. I need more time. There was despair in her voice. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. 2 cold-faced after-sales engineers appeared on the entry monitor. Hello, Miss Evelyn. Our backend has detected a serious system failure in your A7 unit. There is a potential safety risk, and it needs to be retrieved immediately. She's not home. I answered through the intercom in the steadiest voice I could manage. I'm her husband. Whatever it is, you can wait until she gets back. The people outside clearly weren't buying it. Sir, this is urgent. Please cooperate with our work. Open the door right now. Their voices were completely emotionless, but full of undeniable pressure. I didn't answer again. A few seconds later, I heard a sharp electrical buzzing from the lock. They were forcefully hacking the electronic lock on my front door. Evelyn rushed out of the study, her face pale as death. 10 minutes max. No, they'll get in within 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We were trapped in this seemingly safe home like beasts in a cage. What do we do? What do we do? My brain was racing like an overloaded machine. Luna's diary. I suddenly remembered. On one page of her diary, Luna had scribbled a line. She said that to prevent a robot from losing control in extreme situations. There seemed to be an emergency physical network cutoff switch installed somewhere inside her body. But even she didn't know exactly where it was. I rushed over to Luna and asked her as fast as I could. If you can understand me, tell me where the physical switch is. A7's electronic eyes started flashing wildly between red and blue. Her body trembled slightly, like she was making one last struggle against the control program inside her. She slowly raised her hand and, with all her strength, pointed at where her heart was. I immediately tore open the synthetic skin on her chest. Underneath was a cold, hard metal plate, with no switch or button anywhere. Could it be a voice command? Evelyn suddenly shouted. I remember now. She mentioned something in her diary. She missed her daughter terribly. Her daughter's nickname was Nora. I immediately ran back to the study and frantically flipped through those hundreds of diary pages on the computer. I found an unremarkable diary entry. Luna wrote, I dreamed about Nora again today. She always liked making me play a game with her. I would say, Nora never forgets, and she would answer, there will always be an echo. It's a code phrase. It's a code phrase. I rushed back to the living room. The lock was already halfway hacked. It was letting out a piercing alarm. Facing A7's chest, I used all my strength and shouted those words in a trembling voice. Nora never forgets. There will always be an echo. The moment the words left my mouth, the hard metal plate on A7's chest popped open with a click. Inside was a bright red round button. The physical network cutoff switch. I reached out and slammed it down. At the exact moment my fingertip touched the button, the smart lock on my door was completely breached. The door flew open, and the two engineers rushed in with blank expressions. They immediately saw A7 already offline, frozen in place like a statue, and the three of us standing beside her, ready for them. The lead engineer's eyes turned cold, and he immediately pulled a stun device from his waist. But Evelyn was faster. She shouted at the living room's smart control hub to activate maximum security mode. In an instant, the fire sprinkler system on the ceiling was activated. Freezing water poured down over our heads. A shrill fire alarm blared through the entire floor. While those two were getting drenched and couldn't open their eyes, I grabbed Annie's hand. Move. Evelyn helped support the temporarily paralyzed Luna. The four of us ran down the fire exit without looking back. We rushed into the underground parking garage and jumped into the car we'd already prepared. Evelyn floored it, and the car shot forward like an arrow. In the rearview mirror, a black van came right up behind us. Hold on tight. Evelyn growled as she weaved wildly through traffic. I held the terrified Annie tight while swapping out SIM cards non-stop, trying to contact the only friend I could trust, my college roommate, Felix, a fairly well-known investigative reporter. He picked up quickly. I told him everything as fast as I could. On the other end, Felix went from shocked to furious. In the end, he only said one thing. Send me your location. I'll set up a place that's absolutely safe for you. Just as we were about to get onto the overpass, the black van suddenly sped up and slammed hard into the back of our car. Our car spun out of control and was forced up against the guardrail at the edge of the bridge. The car doors were yanked open. 4 burly men in black suits surrounded our car. It's over, I thought, closing my eyes in despair. Just then, Luna suddenly moved beside me, and her dim blue electronic eyes lit up again. She shoved the car door open and, with her superhuman strength, slammed into the burly man closest to her and knocked him down, creating a precious opening for us to break through. Move. Evelyn reacted instantly and seized the moment while they were thrown into chaos. She jerked the wheel hard and floored the gas pedal. With a piercing screech, the car scraped along the guardrail and forced its way out of the trap. We finally shook off our pursuers for the moment. Following the address Felix sent, we took a winding route. In the end, we hid out on the outskirts of the city, in an urban village full of all kinds of people. Inside a completely unremarkable handshake building, we found the safe house he had prepared for us. The moment we shut the door, the three of us collapsed to the floor in exhaustion. Inside the safe house, Luna's consciousness slowly began to wake up inside that mechanical body. Her eyes were no longer vacant, but her memories were still fragmented. She remembered that her name was Luna. She remembered she had a sick daughter named Nora. She remembered signing a contract to come up with the money. Everything after that was like looking through a thick pane of frosted glass, blurry and unclear. The chip. There's a chip inside my body that's wiping my memories. Evelyn immediately grabbed some tools and gave her a quick checkup. The results made our hearts sink. That physical network cutoff switch only temporarily cut off A7's connection to the outside network. But the core control chip inside her body was still running on its own. It wasn't just continuing to wipe Luna's memories. It also had its own tracking function. It was like carrying a tracker that could expose us at any moment. There was nowhere for us to hide. We had to get it out as soon as possible. But removing a chip so deeply connected to the nervous system required professional medical equipment and a sterile operating environment, and we had neither. Just when we had no idea what to do, Luna looked out the window and suddenly murmured, "Doctor, there's a doctor in the company's medical department." The way she looked at me was different from everyone else. This was a crucial lead. I contacted Felix right away and asked him to use his media connections to help investigate Genesis Tech. and get a list of all current and former doctors. Half an hour later, an encrypted file was sent to my email. I showed Luna photos of all the doctors one by one so she could identify them. When she saw one of the photos, Luna's pupils suddenly shrank. She pointed at a former doctor in the photo, a middle-aged woman wearing glasses, and said with absolute certainty, "It's her." Using the contact information in the file, I called the doctor. After the call connected, she was extremely cautious and almost refused to share any information. It wasn't until I said two names in a trembling voice, Luna, Nora, that the person on the other end fell into a long silence. In the end, the doctor agreed to our request. She told us to go to the private clinic she runs now, and she told us something even more terrifying. "You need to brace yourselves." The doctor's voice was full of exhaustion and helplessness. There was far more than one test subject like Luna in Genesis's underground base. As agreed, late that night, after disguising ourselves, we brought Luna to Doctor's private clinic. The place was remote and looked a little run down. Doctor looked older than in the photo. Her eyes were full of stories. She led us into the operating room. Looking at Luna lying on the operating table, I let out a sigh. This chip is directly connected to her central spinal nerves. The surgery is extremely risky. If anything goes wrong, she could really spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. My heart clenched. As the surgery began, every second felt like torture. Just then, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar encrypted number. I answered the call. A man's voice came from the other end, gentle and refined, yet chilling to the bone. "Sir, this is Damien from Genesis." Damien, the founder of Genesis, the tech godfather praised by countless media outlets, and the one behind all this evil. "I think there's been some misunderstanding between us. Return the product you have to us, and I can guarantee that you and your family, including your parents, will be completely safe." A blatant threat. I turned on speakerphone and had Evelyn start tracing his location immediately. I forced myself to stay calm and let out a cold laugh into the phone. "Damien, your perfect creation is out of control. You must be pretty anxious right now, huh? Looks like you still don't understand the situation." Damien's voice turned cold. "My patience is limited. I've already roughly pinpointed your area. You're in the old southern district of the city, aren't you? My men will soon drag you out of the sewers like rats." My heart jumped into my throat. Evelyn signaled to me. It was A7. It still needed more time. I had to stall him. While I was dealing with Damien, the heart monitor in the operating room suddenly let out a shrill alarm. Luna's heart stopped. Evelyn and I instantly felt like we'd fallen into an ice cave. "Looks like I'm not your only problem." Damien let out a smug laugh on the other end of the line. He seemed to have run out of patience and was ready to give the final order. At that critical moment, the operating room lights went out. Doctor pushed the door open and walked out, exhaustion written all over her face. In her hand was a metal chip no bigger than a fingernail, still faintly blinking red. It worked. After the chip was removed, Luna was out of danger. The lock on her memories was opened. Even though some parts were still missing, the key information slowly started coming back. She told us where the underground base was, along with some details about its internal layout. Doctor also gave us a set of files she had secretly backed up at great risk. Inside was a list of other victims and some brutally inhumane experiment data. At the same time, Felix's investigation also made a major breakthrough. In 3 days, Genesis Tech will hold a new product launch that will be live-streamed worldwide. Damien will be there in person to unveil their groundbreaking second-generation product. "This is our only chance," Felix said over the phone. "We'll expose the whole truth on his home turf, in front of the entire world." A bold plan began to take shape in our minds. Evelyn was in charge of the technical side. She would use the information from Luna and Dr. to create a data bomb and hack into the global livestream system on the day of the launch. Felix and I were responsible for putting all the evidence together. Luna's recorded testimony, Doctor's files, and the diary I copied back then, as well as the dashcam footage from when we were being chased. Luna insisted on appearing on camera herself. She wanted everyone to see that the robot they treated like a product was a living, breathing person, a real mother made of flesh and blood. While organizing the evidence, we uncovered an even more horrifying truth. Damien's ambition went far beyond that. The second-generation product he was developing was actually meant to use some kind of technology to upload customers' consciousness to cloud servers, achieving the digital immortality he envisioned in the form of data. And Luna and the others, those first-generation human robots, were nothing more than lab rats he used to test the technology's stability and controllability. This man was a complete madman. On the day of the launch, we split up. Evelyn and Felix's technical team stayed at the safe house in the urban village, serving as the brains behind our operation. Meanwhile, Luna, who had regained some ability to move, and I, used the fake press credentials Felix had made to successfully slip into the launch venue. The moment I walked into the hall, I looked at the huge Genesis logo on the stage and felt no fear, only the resolve and grim determination of stepping onto a battlefield. The launch venue was packed. Damien was dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit, standing at the center of the stage, like a king ruling over everything. With an incredibly compelling voice, he was painting for the world his grand technological vision of immortality. Thunderous applause filled the room, and the camera flashes were as bright as daylight. Everyone was immersed in the false future he had painted. Right at the peak, just as he announced the new product was about to be unveiled, Evelyn made her move. The massive LED screen in the middle of the venue suddenly went black. The global livestream feed switched in an instant. My face appeared on the screen. Then the video we had carefully put together started playing. Luna's diary, doctor's evidence, the shocking experimental data, a bloody list of victims. Damien's face went from a confident smile to a twisted, livid glare in an instant. Cut the power, now! He screamed hysterically toward backstage. But it was already too late. Luna and I stepped out of the crowd and slowly walked onto the stage. Right in front of all the media cameras, Luna pulled open her collar, revealing the ugly A7 brand on the back of her neck. I snatched the microphone from Damien's hand and faced the crowd, and the audience watching around the world. Then I said, each word clear and deliberate. Technology should never advance at the cost of trampling on humanity and sacrificing human dignity. The venue went deathly silent, then exploded into an overwhelming uproar. The media flashes went crazy, all aimed at us and Damien's pale face. Damien's security rushed forward. But Luna, the woman they once saw as nothing more than a product, stood firmly in front of me like a wall. At the same time, the police Felix had already notified rushed into the venue from all sides. Realizing things had gone bad, Damien tried to escape backstage. But Evelyn had already taken control of the venue's security system and trapped him in the elevator. In the end, this tyrant of a tech empire and his core criminal team were taken down all at once. The midday sun streamed through the venue's huge glass curtain wall and poured in without anything blocking it. In that light, I saw 2 hot tears rolling down Luna's face. A few months later, the news was still covering the ongoing investigation into the Genesis Tech case. More victims were successfully rescued. Luna was finally reunited with her daughter Nora, whom she had missed day and night. Evelyn and I were walking our daughter across the grass in the park. She held my hand tightly, as if she was afraid I might disappear at any moment. Annie ran ahead, letting out bright, cheerful laughter. I looked at her back, then at the woman beside me whom I had gotten back, and knew that what we had won back was not just peace, but something even more important, the most basic human conscience and dignity.